I'm Marcus Chen, 47, and until 3 weeks ago, I thought my biggest problem was deciding between my third Tesla or taking the helicopter to my Malibu house. I built CloudSync Technologies from my garage into a $2.8 billion empire, working 16-hour days while my family enjoyed the lifestyle my success provided. But when my 8-year-old daughter Emma didn't come home from what my wife called a fun family camping trip with my in-laws, I discovered the horrifying truth. The ransom note wasn't from strangers, it was from my own family, demanding $50 million for my children's return. They called it teaching me the value of family time. As I held that note, realizing my own blood had weaponized my love for my kids, I knew this wasn't just about money. This was about showing them what happens when you mistake my kindness for weakness. If you've ever trusted the wrong people, hit that like button, beckos. You're about to see how I made them regret every single decision. My alarm goes off at 4:30 a.m. every weekday, but I'm usually already awake, mind racing with ideas for CloudSync's next expansion. The view from my Palo Alto penthouse stretches across Silicon Valley, where the lights of other tech companies twinkle like stars in the pre-dawn darkness. This is the kingdom I built, one line of code at a time. 15 years ago, I was writing software in my garage, surviving on ramen noodles and determination. Sarah used to bring me coffee during those endless nights, believing in my vision when no one else would. Her family thought she was crazy for dating some nobody programmer, as her mother Patricia so elegantly put it during our first Christmas dinner together. Now CloudSync Technologies employs over 8,000 people across 12 countries. We revolutionized cloud storage and data synchronization, making it seamless for businesses to operate globally. The IPO 3 years ago valued us at $2.8 billion, and my 35% stake made me one of the youngest billionaires in tech history. But success came with a price I'm still learning to calculate. My daily routine is clockwork precision. Workout at 5 a.m., breakfast while reviewing overnight reports from our Asian offices. First calls with the London team by 7 a.m. Sarah handles the kids' morning routine cereal preference changes weekly, and Jake always forgets his soccer cleats to catch glimpses of them rushing around, backpacks flying, Emma's laugh echoing through our marble hallways. The guilt gnaws at me constantly. Last Tuesday, Emma drew a picture of our family at school. For stick figures, Mommy, Emma, Jake, and a tiny figure in the corner labeled Daddy at work. When she showed it to me, her 8-year-old eyes held no accusation, just acceptance that this was normal. Sarah's family embraced me enthusiastically once the money started flowing. Patricia, who once suggested Sarah could do better, now calls me the most wonderful son-in-law. Robert, her father, suddenly had business ideas that needed just a small investment. David, Sarah's younger brother, discovered his passion for entrepreneurship right around the time I bought Sarah her first Mercedes. I've funded Robert's failing restaurant chain 3 times. David's revolutionary app ideas have cost me over $2 million in development costs. Patricia's medical bills, David's mortgage, even Sarah's cousin's wedding. I've written checks for everything, thinking generosity would buy me the family support I never had growing up. My own parents died in a car accident when I was 19. Sarah's family filled that void, and I was grateful for their acceptance. When they praised my work ethic, called me driven and focused, I felt like I belonged somewhere. I thought their increasing requests for financial help were natural fit. Taking care of family. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd built a company connecting people across the globe. Yet I barely connected with my own children. Emma's bedtime stories came from audiobooks. Jake's soccer games were YouTube highlights I watched during conference calls. Sarah managed the family calendar, coordinated vacations I was too busy to enjoy, and handled every crisis while I handled quarterly earnings reports. You're living the American dream, Patricia would say during our monthly family dinners. Working hard, providing for everyone. That's what real men do. I believed her. I believed that my worth was measured in zeros, on bank statements, that love was expressed through wire transfers and platinum credit cards. The family's increasing financial dependence felt like proof of my success, not a warning sign of something darker brewing beneath the surface. The warning signs were there for months, but I was too buried in work to see them clearly. Looking back now, every conversation, every suggestion, every seemingly innocent comment was part of a carefully orchestrated plan. It started in March during Emma's birthday party. Patricia pulled me aside while the kids were playing in the backyard, her voice carrying that tone she used when dispensing what she considered wisdom. Marcus, you know I love you like my own son, she began, her manicured hand resting on my arm. But you're missing Emma's childhood. These years, they don't come back. I'd heard variations of this speech before, usually after missing a school play or arriving late to a family dinner, but this time felt different, more urgent, more pointed. She asked me yesterday if Daddy lives at his office, Patricia continued, her eyes glistening with what seemed like genuine concern. Children need their father present, not just providing. Sarah joined us then, sliding her arm around my waist in a gesture that felt more possessive than affectionate. We've been talking about this as a family, she said. Maybe it's time to step back a little. Let others run the day-to-day operations. The family WhatsApp group that Sarah had created 6 months earlier became increasingly active with messages about my work schedule. David would send articles about work-life balance with laughing emojis. Robert shared stories about successful businessmen who burned out young. Even Sarah's Aunt Jennifer, who lived in Portland and rarely spoke to anyone, suddenly had opinions about my workaholic tendencies. Just saying, "'Cause." David texted one evening after I'd missed Jake's baseball game. "What's the point of having all that money if you can't enjoy your family?" The messages felt supportive at first, a family concerned about my well-being, wanted me to find balance. But the frequency increased, and the tone shifted from gentle concern to persistent pressure. Sarah began scheduling mandatory family time without consulting me. Weekend trips to Napa Valley during crucial product launches, dinner reservations on nights when I had investor calls with Tokyo. When I explained why I couldn't attend, her disappointment felt heavier than usual, weighted with something I couldn't identify. "Your children are growing up without you," she said one night as I worked on my laptop in bed. "Emma drew another picture today. This time you weren't in it at all." The guilt was suffocating. Every missed bedtime story, every conference call during dinner, every weekend email became evidence of my failures as a father and husband. I started wondering if they were right. Maybe I had lost perspective. Maybe success meant nothing. If I was failing the people I loved most. Patricia's visits became more frequent. She'd arrive unannounced with homemade cookies and stay 4 hours, regaling Sarah with stories of friends whose husbands had found balance by delegating more responsibility. She'd mention tech executives who'd stepped down from active roles to focus on family, always emphasizing how much happier they seemed. "Look at Bill Gates," she'd say, settling into our kitchen island with her coffee. He stepped back from Microsoft to focus on what really mattered: family, philanthropy, making a real difference. The conversations always circled back to the same theme. I was too involved in the business. I needed to trust others. I needed to prioritize family over profits. The message was consistent across all family members, as if they'd coordinated their talking points. During a particularly stressful week in May, when CloudSync was negotiating a major acquisition, Sarah suggested I take a sabbatical. "Just 6 months, she said, her voice soft and reasonable. "Let your executive team prove they can handle things. Spend time with the kids. Reconnect with what matters." I laughed it off, explaining that the acquisition required my direct involvement, but Sarah's expression didn't match her understanding words. For just a moment, I saw something flicker across her face: frustration, anger. It was gone so quickly. I wondered if I'd imagined it. The pressure intensified after a particularly successful quarter. When CloudSync's stock price hit an all-time high, instead of celebration, the family seemed almost annoyed by the achievement. "More money, more problems," David commented when I mentioned the stock surge during Sunday dinner. "When's enough going to be enough?" Patricia nodded sagely. "Money can't buy back lost time with your children, Marcus. It can't give you those precious moments once they're gone." I found myself defending my work ethic to the people who should have been proudest of my success. Every achievement felt hollow when filtered through their lens of disapproval. I began questioning decisions that had made me successful, wondering if dedication was actually selfishness in disguise. The final warning sign came 2 weeks before the camping trip. I was in my home office late one evening when I heard Sarah on the phone in the kitchen. Her voice was hushed, urgent. "No, it has to be perfect," she was saying. "He can't suspect anything until ... Yes, I know the timing is crucial." When I asked about the call later, she claimed it was party planning for Jake's upcoming birthday. But Jake's birthday wasn't for 3 months, and Sarah had never been secretive about party planning before. Usually she involved me in every decision, from venue selection to guest lists. I should have trusted my instincts, should have asked more questions, should have realized that a family who'd spent years enjoying the fruits of my obsessive work ethic wouldn't suddenly develop genuine concern for my well-being. But I wanted to believe they cared. I wanted to believe that their pressure came from love, not calculation. I wanted to believe that family meant something more than financial convenience, that misplaced trust would cost me everything I truly valued. The camping trip proposal came on a Thursday morning in late June, delivered with Sarah's brightest smile and most enthusiastic voice. I was reviewing quarterly projections over coffee when she practically bounced into the kitchen, her energy infectious. "I have the most amazing idea," she announced, pouring herself coffee and settling beside me at the breakfast bar. "Dad and Mom want to take the kids camping this weekend at Lake Tahoe. A real grandfather-grandchildren bonding experience." Emma looked up from her cereal, eyes wide with excitement. "Camping, like with tents and s'mores?" "Exactly like that, sweetie," Sarah said, ruffling Emma's hair. "Grandpa Robert found this gorgeous campsite right on the lake. They've been planning it for weeks." I felt the familiar knot of conflict in my stomach. The weekend ahead was crucial. CloudSync's acquisition of a Danish startup required delicate negotiations across multiple time zones. But Emma's face was radiant with anticipation, and Jake had already started asking if he could bring his fishing rod this weekend. I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. I have the Copenhagen deal finalizing, and the Tokyo team needs. That's exactly why this is perfect, Sarah interrupted, her hand covering mine. You'll have the whole weekend to focus completely on work. No distractions, no guilt about missing family time, and the kids get an adventure with their grandparents. Patricia had arrived during our conversation, letting herself in through the back door as she'd been doing more frequently lately. She carried a manila folder thick with papers. I've already researched the campsite, she said, spreading brochures across the counter. Pine Lake Family Camping Resort. It's only 2 hours away, but completely off-grid. No cell service, no internet. Just pure nature and family time. The photos showed a pristine lake surrounded by towering pines, with rustic cabins and designated camping areas. It looked idyllic, exactly the kind of place where kids could run free and grandparents could create lasting memories. The best part, Patricia continued, is that it's educational. They have nature programs, hiking trails, even a small observatory for stargazing. Emma will love the astronomy program. Emma was practically vibrating with excitement. Can we really go, Daddy, please? Jake looked up from his phone, actually interested in something other than his video games. Will there be fish in the lake, Grandpa? Robert's arrival seemed perfectly timed, as if orchestrated. He swept Emma into a bear hug and immediately began describing the fishing opportunities, the hiking trails, and the campfire stories they'd share. I used to take your mommy camping when she was your age, he told Emma. She caught her first fish at a lake just like this one. Maybe you'll catch yours too. The pressure was subtle but overwhelming. For adults presenting a united front, to children with faces full of hope, and me with a schedule that actually would benefit from an uninterrupted weekend. The logic was sound, the presentation, flawless. My hesitation wasn't about the camping trip itself, it was about the nagging feeling that something felt rehearsed about the whole proposal. The way Patricia had appeared with research materials ready, Robert's perfectly timed arrival, Sarah's unusual enthusiasm for a plan that would separate her from the children for an entire weekend. I don't know, I said slowly. They've never been camping before. Emma gets scared sleeping anywhere but her own bed. That's exactly why this is perfect, Sarah said quickly. She'll be with Grandma and Grandpa, people she trusts completely, and it's not like they'll be roughing it. The campsite has proper bathrooms and a camp store. Patricia pulled out additional papers from her folder. I've already made reservations for 2 cabins, just in case the weather turns. And look, they have a medical facility on site. I've thought of everything. The reservations were already made. The planning was complete. The children were already mentally packed and ready to go. Saying no would crush Emma's excitement and make me look like the workaholic villain they'd been painting me as for months. What do you think, kids? I asked, though their expressions made their opinions clear. Please, Daddy, Emma said, climbing onto my lap. I want to see the stars through the big telescope. Jake nodded enthusiastically, and Grandpa promised to teach me how to gut a fish. Sarah squeezed my hand. It's just 2 nights. They'll be back Sunday evening, full of stories and probably exhausted enough to sleep for 12 hours straight. The final persuasion came from an unexpected source, my own guilt. For months, they'd been telling me I worked too much, that I missed too many family moments. Here was a chance for my children to have an adventure while I handled crucial business. It seemed like a win-win situation. All right, I said, and Emma's squeal of delight made my chest tight with love. But I want check-in calls every evening, and everyone needs to pack warm clothes. Mountain nights get cold. The next 24 hours were a whirlwind of preparation. Sarah took the kids shopping for camping gear, returning with matching sleeping bags, new hiking boots, and enough outdoor equipment to survive a month in the wilderness. Patricia handled the food planning, preparing coolers full of pre-made meals and snacks. Robert studied maps and trail guides, discussing routes and activities. With the enthusiasm of a professional camp counselor, David even stopped by to contribute camping stories and advice, adding to the excitement building around the trip. Friday morning came with chaos and anticipation. Emma had packed 3 stuffed animals, 2 books, and her favorite pillow. Jake's backpack contained fishing lures, his Nintendo Switch, despite being told there was no electricity, and enough protein bars to feed a small army. I hugged them both goodbye in our driveway. Breathing in Emma's strawberry shampoo scent and feeling Jake's growing strength in his hug, they were so excited they could barely stand still. Be good, for Grandma and Grandpa, I told them. And remember, check in every evening, Emma finished, giggling. You already told us 10 times, Daddy. Sarah kissed me goodbye, her lips lingering longer than usual. Try to relax this weekend, she whispered. Maybe we can plan something special for when they get back. As I watched Robert's SUV disappear down our street, Emma's face pressed against the window, waving frantically, I felt a mixture of relief and unease. The house was suddenly too quiet, too empty. I had 48 hours of uninterrupted work time ahead of me. The Copenhagen acquisition would require my full attention, and having no family obligations should have felt liberating. Instead, I felt like I was watching my children drive towards something I couldn't see clearly. something my instincts whispered warnings about, but my rational mind dismissed as parental overprotection. I should have listened to those whispers. Friday evenings, check-in call never came. By 7 o'clock, I'd completed 3 hours of negotiations with the Copenhagen team and was feeling optimistic about closing the acquisition. The house was peaceful, my home office organized exactly how I liked it, and I had Chinese takeout on the way. For the first time in months, I was experiencing the focused productivity that had built my empire. Then I realized I hadn't heard from the kids. I called Patricia's cell phone first. It went straight to voicemail, her cheerful voice, promising to return calls as soon as possible. I tried Robert's phone with the same result. Then David's, thinking maybe they'd asked him to relay messages. Nothing. Sarah emerged from her yoga session around 8, glowing from her workout and seemingly unconcerned about the lack of communication from our children. They're probably having too much fun to remember, she said, toweling off her hair. Remember when you were a kid? Time works differently when you're having adventures. But I did remember being a kid, and I remembered that my parents established check-in times for good reasons. Patricia had been the one to suggest evening calls, emphasizing how important it was for Emma to hear familiar voices before bed in a strange place. Patricia specifically said they'd call after dinner. I insisted, checking my phone again. Emma gets anxious without her bedtime routine. She'd want to say goodnight. Sarah shrugged, settling onto the couch with a glass of wine. Maybe there's no cell service. You heard Mom, it's completely off-grid. That's the whole point. The explanation was logical, but it didn't ease the growing tension in my chest. Patricia had been very specific about the evening check-ins. She'd even discussed backup plans. If cell service was spotty, there was a landline at the camp office, a satellite phone for emergencies. I tried calling the Pine Lake Family Camping Resort directly. The number rang endlessly without even reaching voicemail. When I searched online for their website, I found basic information but no working contact numbers, no recent reviews, no social media presence. Something's wrong, I told Sarah, showing her the sparse online information. This place barely exists digitally. What kind of family resort has no online presence in 2024? Sarah glanced at my laptop screen with mild interest. Not every business needs a massive online footprint, Marcus. Some places thrive on word of mouth and repeat customers. It's actually kind of refreshing. Her casual dismissal felt wrong. This was the same woman who researched restaurants for hours before making dinner reservations, who read reviews for every product before purchasing. The woman who'd installed tracking apps on the kids' phones just for safety was now completely unconcerned about losing contact with them in an unknown location. Saturday morning brought no messages, no missed calls, no indication that our children were safe and happy. My productivity from the previous day evaporated into anxiety and distraction. The Copenhagen negotiations required my full attention, but I kept checking my phone every few minutes. I called Sarah's family members individually, hoping someone had heard from the camping group. Sarah's Aunt Jennifer in Portland hadn't spoken to Patricia in weeks. Her cousin Michelle in San Diego was surprised to learn about any camping trip. That's weird, Michelle said. Aunt Patricia has been saying for months that Uncle Robert's back is too bad for camping. She was worried about him even doing yard work. Red flags multiplied throughout the day. When I tried researching the specific campsite Patricia had shown us in her brochures, I couldn't find any Pine Lake family camping resort matching the description. There were several Pine Lake locations in California, but none matched the photographs or amenities Patricia had described. Sarah's responses to my growing concern were increasingly dismissive and oddly defensive. You're being paranoid, she said. When I suggested driving to the supposed campsite location, this is exactly what we were talking about. You can't even relax when the kids are having fun with their grandparents. Having fun where? I pressed. I can't verify this place actually exists, Sarah. The website is basically blank. The phone numbers don't work, and none of your family members knew about your father's camping plans. She turned away from me, busying herself with unnecessary kitchen tasks. You're overthinking everything. They probably just drove to a different campsite if that one was full. Dad's good at finding backup plans, but Patricia had shown us confirmed reservations. She'd had specific site numbers, detailed maps, printed confirmations with dates, and payment information. People don't make backup plans for prepaid, confirmed reservations unless something significant changes. Sunday morning arrived with still no word from my children. The Copenhagen deal was falling apart due to my distracted attention. I'd missed 2 crucial calls and responded to emails with incomplete information. My reputation for focused professionalism was crumbling while my parental anxiety skyrocketed. I called the local sheriff's departments in 3 counties around Lake Tahoe, asking about Pine Lake Family Camping Resort. None of the officers recognized the name or location. Just suggested I might be thinking of different facilities, but when I described Patricia's brochures, they couldn't identify any matching campgrounds. Sarah found me at my desk Sunday afternoon, surrounded by printed maps and frustrated phone notes. This has gone far enough, she said, her voice carrying an edge I'd never heard before. You're turning a family camping trip into some kind of conspiracy theory. The kids are fine. My parents are responsible adults. You need to trust people. Sometimes trust. The word hit me like a physical blow. I'd trusted Sarah with everything: my heart, my children, my vulnerabilities. I'd trusted her family with my money, my support, my belief that they cared about me as more than a financial resource. But trust required evidence, and the evidence was terrifying in its absence. They said they'd call, I said quietly. Emma would have insisted on calling. She gets scared sleeping away from home. She would have wanted to hear my voice. Sarah's expression softened slightly, but her words remained firm. Maybe this is good for her. Maybe she's learning to be more independent. Maybe you're the one who can't handle being separated from the kids. The accusation stung because it contained truth. I did struggle with separation from Emma and Jake, my own parents. Sudden death had left me hyper-aware of how quickly loved ones could disappear. But parental anxiety didn't explain the missing website, the non-functional phone numbers, the family members who knew nothing about camping plans. By Sunday evening, when they were supposed to return, my worry had transformed into something darker and more certain. This wasn't camping. This wasn't family bonding. This was something else entirely. At 8:47 p.m., my phone finally rang. Unknown number, local area code. I answered before the first ring finished. Daddy. Emma's voice was small, uncertain, nothing like the excited child who'd left Friday morning. Emma, sweetheart, are you okay? Where are you? We're still camping, Daddy. Grandma says we need to stay a little longer because you need to learn something important. The phone was taken away before I could respond, before I could ask more questions, before I could tell my daughter that Daddy was learning something important indeed, that the people he'd trusted most in the world were capable of using his children as weapons against him. When the line went dead, I knew with absolute certainty that my family had crossed a line from which there would be no return. Asterisk. The family conference call came Tuesday evening, exactly 24 hours after I'd received their ransom note. My phone rang at 8 p.m. sharp. They were nothing if not punctual in their extortion efforts. I'd spent those 24 hours installing recording equipment on my phone, consulting with 3 different law firms, and researching federal kidnapping statutes. When Patricia's number appeared on my screen, I was ready. Hello, Marcus. Patricia's voice carried the warm, patient tone she'd used when teaching Emma to bake cookies. Have you had time to consider our proposal? Your proposal? I kept my voice steady, clinical. Is that what we're calling kidnapping now? Oh, sweetheart, you're being so dramatic. The children are having a wonderful time. Robert took them hiking this morning, and Emma found the most beautiful wildflowers. She made you a bouquet. In the background I could hear Robert clearing his throat, then David's voice joining the call. Sarah's breathing was audible, but she hadn't spoken yet. We're all here, Patricia continued, because we love you, and we're worried about you. This isn't punishment, Marcus. This is rescue. Robert's gravelly voice cut through the speaker. Son, you've lost perspective. I've watched successful men destroy their families before. The money becomes more important than the people who made the sacrifice worthwhile. What sacrifice? The words came out sharper than I'd intended. What exactly have you sacrificed, Robert? Your failing restaurants that I've funded 3 times. Your mortgage that I've been paying for 2 years? Silence stretched across the line before David's voice emerged, defensive and angry. See? This is exactly what we're talking about. You think everything is about money. You keep score of every dollar like it defines your relationships. It does define our relationship, David. Your relationship with me began when my bank account reached 7 figures. Before that, you barely acknowledged my existence. Sarah finally spoke, her voice soft and hurt. That's not fair, Marcus. We were building a life together long before you got wealthy. Were we? Or were you building a lifestyle that required my wealth to maintain? The conversation devolved quickly from there. Patricia's grandmotherly concern transformed into defensiveness. Robert's paternal authority became aggressive justification. David abandoned all pretense of family concern and revealed the entitlement that had been simmering beneath the surface for years. You act like you earned everything alone, David snapped. Like you didn't have family support, emotional labor. From Sarah, babysitting, from mom and dad. We invested in your success too. Invested? I laughed, a sound without humor. You invested by accepting every check I wrote, every favor I granted, every opportunity I provided. That's not investment, that's consumption. Patricia's voice cut through our argument with steel beneath. The sweetness, this attitude is exactly why we had to take action. You've become arrogant, Marcus. Cold, calculating. You see dollar signs where you should see family bonds? I see family members who coordinated to kidnap my children for $50 million. I see people who coached Emma and Jake to deliver their own ransom demands. I see criminals who've justified their crimes by calling them intervention. Robert's voice boomed across the connection. Those children need to learn that their father isn't God. That money can't solve every problem. That family relationships require more than financial support. Asterisk, so you taught them by traumatizing them by making them participants in extortion. We taught them by showing them what it feels like when daddy has to make difficult choices, when work can't be the priority, when family has to come first. Sarah's voice broke through the argument, tears audible in her words. They miss you, Marcus. But they're also discovering they can be happy without constant entertainment, without screens, without the artificial stimulation you've surrounded them with. Emma spent 2 hours yesterday just watching clouds. When's the last time she had that kind of peace? When's the last time she had her father? When's the last time she slept in her own bed? When's the last time she felt safe instead of confused about why grandma won't let her call daddy whenever she wants? The silence that followed was charged with tension and unspoken threats. Patricia's voice returned, harder now. Stripped of pretense? Here's what's going to happen. Marcus, you're going to transfer the $50 million to the account we provided. You're going to cancel all meetings for the rest of the week. You're going to sit in that big empty house and think about what kind of father you want to be. And if I don't, David's voice was cold, then the children stay where they are until you do. Simple as that. For how long? Robert answered. As long as it takes for you to understand that some things are more important than quarterly profits. I took a deep breath, letting the weight of their threat settle before responding. Let me make sure I understand this correctly. You've kidnapped my children, demanded $50 million, and you're justifying it as family therapy? We've created consequences for your choices, Patricia corrected. Actions have results. Marcus, your action of choosing work over family has resulted in your family choosing itself over your work schedule. My work schedule that pays for David's mortgage and Robert's medical bills. And your weekly spa appointments, Patricia. My work schedule that funded every family vacation, every birthday party, every Christmas gift for the past 5 years. Sarah's voice cracked as she spoke. None of that matters if we don't have you, Marcus. If the kids don't have their father present in their lives, so you took them away from me completely. You thought kidnapping would make me more present. We thought losing them temporarily might help you realize you don't want to lose them permanently. The threat was clear now, stripped of all pretense. This wasn't about work-life balance or family intervention. This was about control, manipulation, and financial extraction disguised as tough love. David's voice carried a note of finality. You have 5 days left. Marcus, the money transfers, or this situation continues indefinitely. Your choice, my choice. I laughed, the sound bitter and sharp. You've removed all my choices. You've taken my children, invaded my home, and demanded ransom. Then you're calling it my choice. Patricia's voice softened again, returning to her manipulative grandmother tone. Sweetheart, we're giving you the greatest gift possible, a chance to save your relationship with your children before it's too late. Before they grow up feeling abandoned by a father who chose spreadsheets over soccer games. They don't feel abandoned. They feel loved, supported, and proud of their father's work. They feel neglected, Robert interjected. Emma told Patricia just yesterday that she wishes Daddy cared about her drawings as much as he cares about his phone calls. The manipulation was masterful and devastating. They were using my children's words, possibly coached or taken out of context, as weapons against me. Every normal childhood moment of wanting more attention was being weaponized into evidence of my failures as a father. Put Emma on the phone, I demanded. Let me talk to my daughter. She's sleeping, Sarah said quickly. It's past bedtime, and we're maintaining healthy routines here. Then put Jake on. He's helping his grandfather with evening chores, learning responsibility. Every request was blocked. Every demand for direct contact with my children deflected. They controlled the communication, the narrative, and the timeline. I was completely powerless, exactly as they'd intended. You want $50 million and a promise to change my work habits, I said slowly. What guarantee do I have that you'll return my children? What's stopping you from moving the goalposts once I've paid? David's voice was smug. You'll have to trust us, won't you? Trust that family takes care of family. Trust. I repeated the word like poison. You want me to trust people who've kidnapped my children and are holding them for ransom? We want you to trust people who've loved and supported you for 15 years, Patricia corrected. People who've watched you slowly disappear into your work until you barely exist as a husband and father. I exist as the person who makes your comfortable lives possible. I exist as the person who funds Robert's medical treatment and David's entrepreneurial fantasies. I exist as the bank account you've all been withdrawing from for years. Sarah's voice broke completely. Is that really what you think? That we only care about your money? I think you care about my money enough too. Kidnap my children when you thought I might stop providing it unconditionally? The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a fire that was about to consume everything we'd built together. Robert's voice turned threatening. You've got 5 days, son. 5 days to prove that your children matter more than your ego. 5 days to show that you can put family first for once in your life. And if I involve the police? Patricia's laugh was cold. Then this becomes very complicated for everyone involved. The children might get confused about why Daddy called strangers to take away the grandparents who've been caring for them. They might start wondering if Daddy really wants them back, or if he's just angry about having to pay attention to them. The threat was clear: involve law enforcement, and they'd manipulate my children against me, frame my rescue attempts as abandonment, turn Emma and Jake into psychological weapons even more explicitly than they already had. You've thought of everything, I said quietly. We've thought of you, Sarah whispered. We've thought of our family. We've thought of what we could lose if nothing changes. The call ended with no resolution, no compromise, no path forward except complete capitulation to their demands. I sat in my empty house listening to the dial tone, recording equipment still running, evidence of their crimes documented but seemingly useless. They'd crafted the perfect crime: kidnapping disguised as intervention, extortion justified as family therapy, and children turned into willing participants in their own psychological manipulation. As I reviewed the recorded conversation, I realized they'd made one crucial mistake in their perfect plan. They'd underestimated what I was capable of when someone threatened my children. They thought they knew Marcus Chen, the businessman, the workaholic, the provider. They were about to meet Marcus Chen, the father, and that man would stop at nothing to bring his children home safely. I confronted Sarah Wednesday morning in our kitchen, armed with printed bank statements and a clarity that comes from sleepless nights spent uncovering lies. She was making coffee with the casual normalcy of someone whose children weren't being held hostage by their own grandparents. Her yoga clothes were perfectly coordinated, her hair styled despite the family crisis, her movements unhurried and deliberate. We need to talk, I said, spreading the documents across our marble counter. Sarah glanced at the papers. Bank statements from accounts I wasn't supposed to know about, credit card bills hidden in her personal files, loan applications submitted without my knowledge. Her face remained composed, but her hand trembled slightly as she reached for her coffee mug. What are these, Marcus? You tell me. They're statements from accounts you opened using our home as collateral. Credit lines you've been accessing for 18 months. Gambling debts from online poker sites I had no idea you were using. The evidence was devastating and comprehensive. Sarah had accumulated over $800,000 in secret debt across multiple credit lines, online gambling platforms, and personal loans. The spending patterns showed a woman desperate to maintain appearances while spiraling into financial crisis. Designer clothing purchases that exceeded our monthly household budget, spa treatments that cost more than most people's rent, jewelry, cars, vacations, all funded by credit she'd secured against assets I'd built but hadn't protected from her access. I can explain, she began, but I held up my hand. Don't, not yet. First, tell me how long you've been planning this kidnapping scheme. Sarah's composure cracked, revealing the desperation she'd been hiding behind concern for my work-life balance. It's not kidnapping, Marcus. It's an intervention. We're trying to save our family. You're trying to save yourself from bankruptcy. You're trying to save your parents from losing their house when I discover they've been stealing from the joint accounts I set up for family emergencies. You're trying to save David from defaulting on loans I co-signed because I trusted my wife's family. Each accusation hit like a physical blow. Sarah sank into a chair, her perfect facade crumbling as the weight of discovered lies pressed down on her. How long have you been gambling, Sarah? Her voice was barely audible. 2 years? Maybe. 3? How long have you been planning to use our children as leverage against me? This question hung in the air for several minutes. Sarah stared at her hands, her silence more damning than any confession could have been. The family meetings started. Last Christmas, she finally whispered. Mom noticed the bills coming to her address. She figured out I'd been using their information for some of the credit applications. Instead of telling you, she suggested we find a way to solve everyone's problems at once. The revelation was stunning in its premeditated cruelty. For 6 months, my wife and her family had been planning to manipulate me into funding their financial irresponsibility by weaponizing my love for my children. Emma's birthday party, your mother's speech about me missing her childhood, that was rehearsed. Sarah nodded miserably. We thought if we could make you see how much you were missing, you'd willingly take time off, maybe restructure your business. Involvement. The money was supposed to be a bonus, a way to secure the kids' future while solving our immediate problems. Our problems? These are your problems, Sarah. Your gambling addiction, your lies, your family's financial irresponsibility. I had no problems until you created them. Your problem is that you care more about work than family. The words exploded from her with months of built-up resentment. Your problem is that you think money solves everything, that providing financially is the same as being present emotionally. So you decided to teach me by stealing my children and demanding $50 million. Sarah's face crumpled completely. We thought, we hoped you'd realize how much you loved us, how much you needed us. We thought if you had to choose between work and family, you'd choose family. I've been choosing family every day for 15 years. Every long night building the company was for you and the kids. Every weekend meeting, every late conference call, every business triple of it was to build security for our family. But we needed you, not just your money. You had me. Every evening I was home, every weekend I wasn't traveling, every family dinner and school event I could attend. But apparently, that wasn't enough. You needed all of me, all the time. plus all the money, plus the sacrifice of everything I'd built. Sarah stood abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked our pool where Emma had learned to swim, where Jake had practiced diving last summer. The kids barely know you, Marcus. Emma draws pictures where you're tiny or missing completely. Jake talks about you like you're a stranger who lives in our house but isn't really part of our family. Each word was carefully chosen to inflict maximum emotional damage, but I'd learned to recognize manipulation tactics over the past few days. Emma draws pictures of everyone doing activities. In half of them, I'm at work because that's where I am during school hours when she's drawing. Jake talks about all of us differently when we're not around. That's normal child behavior, not evidence of abandonment. You're missing the point. No, Sarah, you're missing the point. The point is that you've destroyed our family to save yourself from the consequences of your gambling addiction. You've traumatized our children to cover up your financial crimes. You've turned Emma and Jake into weapons against their own father because you were too cowardly to confess your problems and ask for help. Sarah's shoulders shook with sobs, but I felt no sympathy. The woman crying in our kitchen was a stranger, who'd been impersonating my wife while planning to use our children as collateral in her desperate schemes. I never meant for it to go this far, she whispered. How far did you mean for it to go? What was the original plan before it became kidnapping and extortion, we thought? Maybe a weekend. Maybe you'd get so worried that you'd promise to change, and we could bring the kids home with everyone happy. And the $50 million. Sarah's silence answered the question. The money had always been the primary objective, the emotional manipulation just the delivery method. Here's what's going to happen, I said, gathering the bank statements. You're going to call your family and tell them this ends now, today. You're going to arrange for Emma and Jake to be returned immediately, or I'm calling the FBI and providing them with evidence of your financial crimes, their kidnapping conspiracy, and the recorded phone conversations proving premeditated extortion. Marcus, please, we can work this out. We can get counseling, fix our marriage. Pay back the money. Our marriage ended the moment you decided our children were acceptable casualties in your financial desperation. The moment you chose gambling over family, lies over trust, extortion over honesty. Sarah looked at me with desperate eyes, seeing perhaps for the first time that her husband, the man she'd manipulated and betrayed, was not going to forgive his way back into victimhood. I love you, she whispered. You love my money. You love the lifestyle I provide. You love having someone to blame for your own choices. But you don't love me, Sarah. If you loved me, you never could have done this. As I walked out of the kitchen, leaving my wife sobbing over evidence of her betrayal, I realized that the Marcus Chen who'd built CloudSync Technologies was about to discover what he was truly capable of when everything he'd worked to protect was threatened. The business world had taught me negotiation, strategy, and leverage, but my family's betrayal was about to teach me something far more dangerous. What happens when a man with unlimited resources decides that mercy is a luxury his enemies don't deserve? *** 15 years ago. I was a 28-year-old programmer, working 16-hour days in a cramped garage apartment, surviving on instant ramen and stubborn determination. My bank account rarely broke for digits, my car was held together by prayer and duct tape, and my biggest luxury was the premium internet connection required for my development work. I met Sarah at a coffee shop near Stanford, where she was finishing her communications degree and I was debugging code on my ancient laptop. She was everything I wasn't: polished, confident, from a family that took financial stability for granted. Her father Robert owned 3 restaurants, her mother Patricia ran a successful interior design consultancy, and her brother David was coasting through business school on family money. What are you working on? Sarah had asked, sliding into the chair across from me with curious eyes and a smile that made my heart race. I explained my project: cloud-based data synchronization, software that would allow businesses to access files seamlessly across multiple devices and locations. It was revolutionary technology in 2009, but I might as well have been speaking Martian to most people. Sarah listened intently, asked intelligent questions, and somehow made my technical explanations sound important rather than boring. When I confessed that I was bootstrapping the entire operation from my garage, barely affording coffee while trying to build something that could change how people worked, she didn't run away screaming. That's incredibly brave, she said. Most people talk about having big ideas. You're actually building yours. Our first date was a $12 dinner at a diner near my apartment. Sarah wore jeans and a sweater, making no attempt to hide that she was slumming it with a broke programmer. When I apologized for not being able to afford somewhere nicer, she laughed and said she preferred authentic conversation over fancy restaurants. Money doesn't make people interesting, she told me over shared French fries. Passion does. And you're passionate about something that could actually matter. Meeting her family was a different experience entirely. Robert greeted me with the kind of firm handshake that's really a strength test, his eyes assessing my worth with the efficiency of an appraiser evaluating damaged goods. Patricia's smile was polite but distant, her questions carefully designed to establish my social and financial status without appearing rude. Software development, Robert mused when I explained my work. That's a nice hobby, But what are your long-term career plans? Something more stable. David, 2 years younger than Sarah but infinitely more entitled, barely acknowledged my existence. He was focused on his own ventures, importing artisanal olive oil from Italy, developing a social media platform for college students, launching a boutique marketing firm, all funded by family money, all failures within 6 months. Patricia's assessment was delivered with surgical precision during Sarah's brief absence from the dinner table. Sarah is accustomed to a certain lifestyle. Marcus, security, comfort, the finer things. She's never had to worry about money, and frankly, we'd prefer to keep it that way. The message was clear. I wasn't good enough for their daughter. I didn't have the pedigree, the connections, or the bank account to merit serious consideration as long-term partner material. Sarah defended me fiercely during the drive home. Her anger, genuine and protective. They're impossible snobs, she said. They can't see past your current situation to recognize your potential. Give them time. Once they understand what you're building, they'll come around. But I'd seen the looks they exchanged when they thought I wasn't watching. The subtle eye rolls when I mentioned my garage apartment. The practiced way they changed subjects when conversation turned to my work. They weren't interested in my potential, they were counting on my failure. Sarah's faith in me became my anchor during the brutal early years of building CloudSync. When investors rejected my proposals, she helped me refine my presentation. When technical challenges seemed insurmountable, she listened to my frustrated explanations and somehow made solutions seem possible. When I doubted whether anyone would ever understand or need what I was creating, she reminded me that the best innovations always seemed crazy until they became essential. You're not building just software, she told me during one particularly dark night when everything seemed to be falling apart. You're building the future of how people work. You're solving problems that most people don't even know they have. Yet her family's attitude shifted gradually as CloudSync gained traction. The first major client contract earned grudging acknowledgement from Robert. The second round of angel investment funding prompted Patricia to ask detailed questions about my business model. When we secured our Series A funding, David suddenly discovered an interest in technology and entrepreneurship. But the real transformation came with our IPO. 3 years ago, suddenly, Robert's restaurants needed technology consultations that only I could provide. Patricia discovered that interior design clients were increasingly requesting smart home integration that required my expertise. David's latest venture was mysteriously related to cloud computing and data management. The family that had once questioned whether I could provide adequate security for their daughter now celebrated my vision, my work ethic, my brilliant strategic thinking. Patricia began introducing me at social events as our son-in-law, tech genius. Robert started claiming credit for encouraging my entrepreneurial spirit from the beginning. I knew from the moment I met him that Marcus was special. Became Patricia's standard story, conveniently forgetting years of subtle disapproval and not-so-subtle suggestions that Sarah could do better. The money changed everything, but not in the way I'd expected. Instead of earning their respect, my success seemed to create an insatiable appetite for more support, more investment, more involvement in every family member's financial decisions. What started as occasional requests for business advice became regular demands for funding various projects and emergencies. Robert's restaurants faced temporary cash flow issues that required immediate capital injection 3 times. Patricia's design business needed expansion funding to capitalize on unprecedented growth opportunities. David's entrepreneurial ventures became my involuntary investment portfolio, with each failure followed by explanations of how market conditions, bad timing, or unforeseeable circumstances had doomed otherwise brilliant concepts. The family that had once worried I couldn't provide for Sarah now treated me like a personal ATM, justifying every request with references to family loyalty and mutual support. When I hesitated to fund David's 4th failed startup, Patricia reminded me that family takes care of family. When I suggested that Robert might need professional business management help for his consistently struggling restaurants, the response was hurt feelings and lectures about trust and support within families. Sarah became the bridge between my growing concerns and her family's increasing demands. She translated their requests into terms that emphasized love and relationship rather than money and obligation. She assured me that their financial struggles were temporary, that their gratitude was genuine, that their intentions were purely about family bonds, rather than financial exploitation. They just want to feel valued. She explained when I questioned the wisdom of funding David's 5th business venture. When you invest in their dreams, it shows you believe in them as people, not just as family members you're obligated to support. I believed her because I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that family relationships could be pure, that love wasn't conditional on financial contributions, that the people closest to me cared about more than my bank account balance. But, looking back now, I can see how each small accommodation led to larger expectations. Each financial gift became precedent for the next request. Each successful rescue of someone else's poor decisions became evidence that I was responsible for solving all family problems. The garage apartment programmer who'd fallen in love with a woman who valued passion over money had slowly transformed. into a cash machine for people who'd learned to disguise financial exploitation as family loyalty. And the woman who'd once told me that money doesn't make people interesting had apparently decided that it made people useful enough to kidnap their children when the cash flow was threatened. Thursday morning. I hired the best private investigation firm in Northern California, a company that specialized in corporate espionage and high-stakes missing persons cases. Their offices occupied an entire floor of a San Francisco high-rise, and their client list read like a Fortune 500 directory. Elena Rodriguez, the firm's senior partner, was a former FBI agent with 20 years of experience in kidnapping cases. She listened to my story with the clinical detachment of someone who'd seen every variation of human betrayal. Family abduction cases are among the most complex we handle, she explained, spreading maps across her conference table. The perpetrators understand the victim's psychology intimately. They have legal access to the children through existing relationships, and they often manipulate law enforcement by claiming family disputes rather than criminal activity. I handed her copies of the ransom note, the recorded phone conversations, and Sarah's financial records. Alina reviewed each document with methodical precision, taking notes and asking clarifying questions that revealed the depth of my family's planning. They've been sophisticated about this, she concluded. The Pine Lake campground that doesn't exist online, the off-grid location, the coordination between multiple family members. This wasn't a desperate impulse decision. This was planned for months. Elena's team began working immediately, deploying resources I didn't know existed in the private sector. Cellular tower analysis to track phone signals from the calls I'd received. Financial forensics to trace the money trails, showing how my family had funded their preparations. Satellite imagery analysis of properties owned or accessible to Robert, Patricia, and David. Your father-in-law owns more property than he's disclosed, Alina informed me by afternoon. 3 parcels in different counties, all purchased through shell companies that trace back to loans you co-signed. There's a cabin property in Mendocino County that matches the terrain visible in the video they sent you. The satellite photos showed a remote compound with multiple buildings, accessible only by a single dirt road that wound through dense forest. The property was 47 acres of wilderness, perfect for hiding 2 children and their adult captors. How quickly can we get them back? I asked. Elena's expression was grave. That depends on whether you want to involve law enforcement or handle this privately. Law enforcement brings resources, but also complications: bureaucracy, potential publicity, legal procedures that could take weeks. Private recovery is faster, but carries different risks. What kind of risks? If we extract the children through private means, your family could claim we kidnapped them from their lawful guardians. They could argue that as grandparents with a history of caring for the children, they had legitimate authority. The legal complications could be significant. I studied the satellite images of the compound where my children were being held. Emma and Jake were somewhere in those buildings, confused and manipulated by people they'd trusted their entire lives. How do we prove they're being held against their will if they don't understand that's what's happening? That's the genius of their approach, Alina said. Children Emma and Jake's age don't conceptualize kidnapping the way adults do. If their grandparents tell them this is an extended camping trip with educational purposes, they'll accept that explanation. The psychological manipulation makes them unwilling participants in their own captivity. Elena's team continued gathering intelligence throughout Thursday and Friday. Financial analysis revealed the full scope of my family's desperation: debts, defaulted loans, medical bills, and business failures totaling nearly $2 million across all family members. This wasn't about teaching you work-life balance, Alina explained during our Friday evening briefing. This was about survival. Your wife's gambling addiction triggered a cascade of financial crises that threatened everyone's lifestyle. They threatened everyone's lifestyle. They needed the $50 million to avoid bankruptcy, foreclosure, and complete financial collapse. The psychological profile her team developed was devastating in its accuracy. Sarah's gambling had started as stress relief during my long work hours, escalated during periods when I traveled frequently, and became compulsive when she began trying to win back previous losses. The addiction had progressed through predictable stages: lying about spending, hiding debts, borrowing against shared assets, and finally involving family members in increasingly desperate schemes. Gambling addicts often involve family members as accomplices, Alina explained. They convince relatives that the addiction is manageable, that one big win will solve all problems, that supporting the gambling is actually helping the family. Your in-laws probably believed they were helping Sarah and protecting the children's financial future. Patricia's medical bills added another layer of desperation. Cancer treatment costs, even with excellent insurance, had exhausted their savings and forced them to mortgage their house. Robert's restaurants were failing due to competition and poor management, but he'd been hiding the losses from the family for over a year. David's entrepreneurial failures were the final straw. Each business venture I'd funded had been accompanied by personal guarantees and co-signed loans. When the businesses failed, David's personal liability threatened his house, his car, and his credit rating. They were facing complete financial destruction, Elena concluded. Your success was their only hope for avoiding bankruptcy and maintaining their lifestyle. From their perspective, this wasn't extortion, it was survival. The video surveillance Elena's team installed around the Mendocino compound confirmed. My children's presence, high-powered telephoto lenses captured images of Emma and Jake playing outside the main cabin, appearing physically healthy but subdued. Patricia and Robert were visible, caring for them, while David seemed to be coordinating security measures. They're treating this like a legitimate family vacation, Elena reported. The children appear to be following normal routines: meals, playtime, bedtime stories. But notice how they never venture far from the adults, never attempt to explore on their own. That suggests careful supervision disguised as protection. Friday afternoon brought the next Ransom video, delivered to my email with subject line Family Update Number 2. Emma and Jake appeared in the same cabin interior, but their expressions were more strained than the first video. Hi Daddy, Emma said, her voice carefully controlled. We've been learning lots of things about camping and nature. Grandma taught me how to identify different birds, and Grandpa showed Jake how to tie fishing knots. Jake's response seemed more rehearsed. We miss you, but we understand you need time to think about family priorities. Grandma says when you're ready to put family first, we can come home and do fun activities together. The video included messages, clearly coached by adults, references to family time and work-life balance and learning what really matters. But I could see the confusion in their eyes, the way they glanced off camera for approval, the subtle signs that they didn't fully understand why they couldn't simply call me whenever they wanted. Elena pointed out details I'd missed. Emma's nervous habit of twisting her hair, which only appeared when she was anxious. Jake's tendency to fidget with his hands, suppressed but visible. Both children showed signs of stress despite their apparent physical comfort. They know something is wrong, Elena concluded. They don't understand what, but they sense the adults are tense, that this situation isn't normal. Children are remarkably perceptive about adult emotional states. By Friday evening, Elena's team had assembled a comprehensive rescue plan. Federal agents were standing by to execute kidnapping charges the moment my children were safely recovered. Financial crimes investigators were prepared to freeze every account my family had access to. Local law enforcement in 3 counties was coordinated and ready. We can have your children back within 6 hours of your authorization, Elena promised. But once we start this process, there's no going back. Your family will face federal kidnapping charges, financial crimes, prosecution, and likely decades in prison. I stared at the satellite images of the compound where Emma and Jake were being held, thinking about the people who'd shared my dinner table for 15 years, who'd celebrated my successes and pretended to care about my welfare while planning to use my children as weapons against me. Do it, I said. The war was about to begin in earnest, and I was done playing by rules that my enemies had abandoned the moment they decided my children were acceptable casualties in their financial desperation. The daily ransom calls became a psychological battleground where my family's desperation clashed with my growing resolve. Each conversation revealed new layers of manipulation, new attempts to break my resistance, and new evidence of how far they were willing to go to extract their $50 million. Saturday's call came at exactly 8 p.m. with Patricia's voice carrying forced cheer that couldn't mask her underlying anxiety. Marcus, sweetheart, the children are asking about you constantly. Emma made you a beautiful drawing of the sunset over the lake. She says she wants to show it to you when you've learned your lesson about family time. Put Emma on the phone. She's busy with evening activities. Robert is teaching both children how to identify constellations. It's educational and bonding, exactly what they've been missing with your busy schedule. In the background, I could hear David's voice giving instructions about something, though his words were muffled. The ambient sound suggested they were indoors, not stargazing, as Patricia claimed. I've had time to think about your demands, I said, keeping my voice neutral. I have questions about the logistics. Patricia's excitement was audible. Oh wonderful, we knew you'd see reason. What questions, dear? $50 million requires specific transfer procedures. I need account verification, routing numbers, and security protocols. Complex financial transactions can't be rushed. Of course. David has all that information ready. He's been researching international banking regulations to ensure everything is handled properly. The mention of international banking revealed more of their plan than Patricia probably intended. They weren't just planning to extort money, they were planning to hide it offshore, making recovery nearly impossible. I'll also need assurance that Emma and Jake are safe and unharmed. Current medical examinations, video calls where I can interact with them directly, proof that they're being cared for properly. Sarah's voice joined the call, breathless with relief. Marcus, I'm so glad you're being reasonable about this. The children are perfectly safe. They're having the time of their lives. Then you won't mind me speaking with them directly. They're asleep. Robert's gruff voice interrupted. Mountain air makes kids tired earlier than city schedules, but they're happy, healthy, and learning valuable lessons about family priorities. Every request for direct contact was deflected with reasonable-sounding explanations that became increasingly implausible. The children were always busy, always sleeping, always engaged in activities that couldn't be interrupted. I was allowed to hear their coached messages but never to have spontaneous conversations. "I need proof of life," I said bluntly. Current video of Emma and Jake with today's newspaper, clear shots of their faces, confirmation that they're unharmed. The silence that followed was charged with tension. David's voice finally responded, "Proof of life. Jesus. Marcus, these are your children with their grandparents, not hostages with terrorists. Your paranoia is exactly why we had to take action. My children have been missing for 6 days. You're demanding $50 million for their return? I'm entitled to proof that they're safe?" Patricia's voice turned sharp. "Your children aren't missing. Marcus, they know exactly where they are and why they're there. They understand that. Daddy needs to learn about putting family first." "What exactly have you told them?" Sarah answered quickly. "We've explained that you're going through a difficult time at work, that you need space to figure out how to balance career and family responsibilities. They understand that this camping trip is giving you time to miss them and realize how important they are." The psychological manipulation was sophisticated and devastating. My children had been told that their absence was helping me, that staying away was actually caring for their father. Any distress they felt about missing me was being reframed as evidence that the intervention was working. "How long are you planning to continue this?" I asked. Robert's voice was firm. "As long as it takes for you to prove that your family matters more than your quarterly profits. Some lessons can't be rushed." "And if I refuse to transfer the money?" The pause that followed revealed the threat. They'd been avoiding stating directly. Patricia's voice became cold. "Then this situation continues indefinitely. Marcus, the children will learn to be independent, to enjoy life without constant entertainment and material possessions. They'll discover that happiness doesn't require expensive toys and structured activities. They'll discover that their father abandoned them. They'll discover that their father chose money over relationships." David corrected. "They'll learn the same lesson we've been trying to teach you, that some things are more valuable than bank account balances." The calls continued throughout the weekend, each conversation following the same pattern. My family presented increasingly elaborate justifications for their actions while revealing more details about their desperation. The $50 million wasn't just about solving current debts, it was about securing their future against any consequences of their financial crimes. Sarah's medical emergency was mentioned casually during Sunday's call. "I've been having anxiety attacks about the situation, Marcus. The stress is making me physically ill. Patricia thinks I might need to be hospitalized if this continues much longer." The manipulation was transparent but effective. Now they were adding Sarah's health to the emotional leverage, suggesting that my resistance was endangering not just my children's emotional well-being, but my wife's physical safety. "Maybe you should have considered that before kidnapping our children," I replied. "Maybe you should consider it before destroying our family with your stubborn pride," Sarah shot back, her voice cracking with manufactured emotion. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the child psychologist Alina, had recommended, analyzed recordings of each conversation and provided insights that strengthened my resolve. "They're creating a narrative where your children are willing participants in their own psychological manipulation," Dr. Walsh explained. "Emma and Jake are being taught that missing their father is selfish, that wanting to go home is ungrateful, that their distress is evidence that they need to learn independence. How much damage is this causing them? Significant trauma that will require years of therapy to address. They're learning that love is conditional, that family relationships involve emotional manipulation, that their own feelings can't be trusted when they conflict with adult agendas." The psychological evaluation provided ammunition for the criminal case Alina was building. "Each day my children remained in captivity, added to the charges my family would face: kidnapping, extortion, child endangerment, and psychological abuse." But the most damaging revelation came from Dr. Walsh's analysis of the background sounds in the Ransom videos. "Listen carefully to this section," she said, playing audio from Friday's video. "That's a child crying in the background, someone younger than Jake based on the vocal patterns. There's another child being held at that location." The implication was staggering. My family hadn't just kidnapped Emma and Jake, they'd involved other children in their scheme, possibly David's own kids or other family members' children. "This isn't a family intervention," Dr. Walsh concluded. "This is a criminal conspiracy involving multiple children as hostages. The psychological damage extends beyond your family to other innocent victims." By Sunday evening, I'd heard enough. The evidence was overwhelming. The psychological damage was escalating, and my family's desperation was making them increasingly dangerous. Elena's team was positioned and ready. Federal agents were coordinated across 3 jurisdictions. Child Protective Services was prepared to evaluate all children found at the compound. "Tomorrow," I told Alina, "we end this tomorrow." The psychological warfare had revealed my enemy's weaknesses, their desperation, their amateur execution, and their fundamental misunderstanding of what I was capable of when my children's safety was threatened. They'd started a war they couldn't finish, using weapons they couldn't control. against an enemy whose resources they'd vastly underestimated. The endgame was about to begin. Monday morning, I assembled the most formidable legal and security team money could buy. The conference room at Blackstone Security felt like a military command center, with Alina Rodriguez coordinating federal agents, FBI specialists, financial crimes investigators, and child recovery experts. Phase 1 begins with financial warfare, Alina explained, pointing to a complex chart showing my family's interconnected debts and dependencies. We cut off every source of income, every line of credit, every financial resource they have access to before we attempt physical recovery. At 9 a.m. Pacific Time, my legal team executed a coordinated financial assault that would have impressed corporate raiders. Every business loan I'd co-signed was called due immediately. Every line of credit, secured against properties I owned, was frozen. Every bank account that listed me as an authorized user was locked pending investigation of fraudulent activity. Robert's restaurants were served with immediate eviction notices for failure to pay rent that I'd been paying through automatic transfers for 18 months. Patricia's design business had its commercial accounts frozen due to suspicious activity reports filed by my banking partners. David's mortgage company received notice that his loan guarantor was disputing the obligation due to misrepresentation and fraud. The beauty of financial leverage, explained Marcus Chen, my lead attorney and no relation despite the shared surname, is that everything collapses simultaneously. They can't address one crisis because 3 others are demanding immediate attention. But 11 a.m., all 3 family members' cell phones were ringing constantly with calls from creditors, landlords, loan officers, and collection agencies. The financial pressure was designed to create panic, force mistakes, and divide their attention from protecting my children. Elena's team monitored the compound through satellite surveillance and electronic intercepts. The stress was visible in their behavior-frantic phone conversations, heated arguments between the adults, and increasingly erratic decision-making. They're realizing this isn't a negotiation anymore, Alina reported. David tried to call you 17 times in the past hour. Patricia attempted to contact 3 different lawyers, but none will take their case once they understand the kidnapping charges. Phase 2 involved strategic media warfare. My public relations team began carefully leaking information about the tech billionaire family crisis to select journalists who specialized in business crime stories. The narrative was crafted to generate public sympathy for my children while destroying any credibility my family might claim for their intervention excuse. Tech mogul's children held hostage by gambling addict, the wife and desperate in-laws, was the headline that would run in Tuesday's Wall Street Journal, unless my children were returned immediately. Family members demand $50 million ransom for executives. Kids was queued for release to CNN Business if negotiations continued beyond Monday afternoon. The threat of public humiliation added another layer of pressure to people who'd spent years enjoying the social status my success provided. Patricia's interior design clients would learn that their decorator was an alleged kidnapper. Robert's restaurant patrons would discover that their favorite dining establishment was owned by someone facing federal extortion charges. David's business associates would understand why their networking contact had suddenly become unemployable. Phase 3 was psychological warfare, designed to isolate them emotionally while maintaining pressure on multiple fronts. Sarah's parents received registered letters from my attorneys detailing the criminal charges. Their participation would generate federal kidnapping 20 years to life, extortion up to 20 years, conspiracy to commit felonies additional 10 years, and child endangerment 5 to 15 years per child. The letters included detailed explanations of federal sentencing guidelines and statistics on conviction rates for kidnapping cases. Your daughter's gambling addiction has destroyed her marriage and endangered her children. The letter to Patricia and Robert stated, continuing to enable her criminal behavior will result in your own imprisonment and the permanent loss of relationship with your grandchildren. David received a separate communication focusing on his business failures and personal liability. Every loan Marcus co-signed, every business investment he funded, every financial favor your family received is now subject to fraud investigation. Continuing this kidnapping conspiracy will result in complete financial destruction and decades in federal prison. Elena's team also discovered David's wife Jennifer and their 2 young children were apparently unaware of the kidnapping scheme. Jennifer believed David was attending a business conference in Sacramento while she managed their household alone. We can use this, Alina suggested. If Jennifer discovers her husband is involved in kidnapping, she might become an ally rather than an accomplice. The anonymous tip to Jennifer about her husband's real activities was delivered through a neighbor, who accidentally mentioned seeing David's car at the Mendocino compound. Within hours, Jennifer was making frantic phone calls trying to locate her husband, adding another layer of pressure to an already unstable situation. By Monday afternoon, the compound was in chaos. Satellite surveillance showed heated arguments between the adults, emergency phone calls, and signs that they were preparing to abandon their position. David's car was loaded with supplies, suggesting they were planning to move my children to a different location. They're panicking, Alina reported. The financial pressure combined with legal threats and family discord is forcing them into reactive rather than strategic thinking. This is when they'll make mistakes. The breakthrough came at 3:47 p.m. when Patricia called my direct line, her voice shaking with desperation and rage. "You bastard," she hissed. "You're destroying our entire family over your own stubborn pride. Robert's medication costs alone will bankrupt us without the restaurant income. I have cancer treatments that cost $30,000 per month. David has 2 babies who need their father. Then you should have considered those consequences before kidnapping my children. We were trying to save your family. We were trying to make you see that money isn't everything, that relationships matter more than quarterly reports. By holding Emma and Jake hostage, by demanding $50 million, by traumatizing children to cover up Sarah's gambling debts." Patricia's voice cracked completely. "Sarah is sick. Marcus' gambling addiction is a disease, not a choice. She needs treatment, not punishment. The children need their mother healthy and present, not destroyed by public humiliation and criminal charges. Sarah needed treatment 2 years ago when she started hiding debts. She needed intervention when she began using our children as emotional leverage. She needed help when she chose gambling over family stability. Instead, you chose to enable her addiction and escalate it into criminal conspiracy. We can fix this," Patricia pleaded. "We can get Sarah into treatment, pay back the money, make everything right. But not if you destroy us all with criminal charges and public shame. You can fix this by returning Emma and Jake immediately. Every hour they remain in your custody adds to the charges you'll face. And then what? We lose everything anyway. We go to prison anyway. Our grandchildren grow up knowing their grandparents are criminals. You should have thought about that before you became criminals." The call ended with Patricia's desperate sobs. But Elena's team had traced the signal to the exact location within the compound. The technical surveillance confirmed what behavioral analysis had suggested. My family was fracturing under pressure, making increasingly desperate decisions, and losing control of their carefully planned operation. "They're moving the children tonight," Elena concluded. "David's vehicle activity, supply loading, and communication patterns all suggest they're abandoning the compound. If we don't act now, we could lose them for weeks or months while they find a new location." Phase 4 was about to begin. Direct action to recover my children and end this nightmare permanently. The teams were positioned, the legal authorizations were signed, and the backup plans were coordinated across multiple agencies. Federal agents, child protection specialists, medical personnel, and psychological counselors were all standing by. "Once we start this," Elena warned, "everything changes permanently. Your family relationships will never recover. Sarah, Patricia, Robert, and David will face serious prison time. Your children will need extensive therapy to process their trauma. Your life will never be the same." I thought about Emma's laugh echoing through our house, Jake's excited chatter about soccer practice, the bedtime stories I'd missed, and the family dinners I'd prioritized over work calls. I thought about the people who'd shared my table for 15 years while planning to use my love for my children as a weapon against me. "Do it," I said. The final phase was about to begin, and there would be no mercy for people who'd chosen to target the most precious things in my world. Asterisk, asterisk. The pressure reached breaking point Tuesday morning when my family realized their perfect plan was collapsing into a nightmare they couldn't control. David's frantic call came at 6:23 a.m., his voice cracking with desperation and panic. "Marcus, we need to talk. This has gotten completely out of hand. We never meant for it to go this far." "How far did you mean for it to go, David? What was the acceptable level of traumatizing my children?" "They're not traumatized. They're having fun, learning about nature, spending quality time with family. But the financial stuff you're doing that's destroying innocent people." In the background, I could hear Patricia crying and Robert's voice raised in what sounded like a heated argument. The compound was clearly in chaos, with adults arguing while my children listened to their family disintegrating around them. "Jennifer knows, doesn't she?" I pressed. "Your wife figured out where you really are and what you're really doing." David's silence confirmed my suspicion. Elena's psychological pressure tactics were working exactly as designed. "She took the kids to her mother's house," David finally admitted. "She's talking about divorce, about protecting our children from my criminal associations. She thinks I've lost my mind." "You have lost your mind. You've all lost your minds if you thought kidnapping children was an acceptable solution to your financial problems. It's not kidnapping." David's voice rose to a shout. "They're with family members who love them, learning valuable lessons about life priorities. This is intervention, not crime." But his protestations sounded hollow, even to himself. The legal documents my attorneys had served made clear that regardless of their intentions or justifications, they were facing federal kidnapping charges that carried decades of prison time. Sarah's voice joined the call, her words slurred with what sounded like alcohol or medication. "Marcus, please, I'm sick. I need help, not criminal charges. The children need their mother in treatment, not prison. The children need to come home. Today, this morning. Every hour this continues makes everything worse for everyone involved." Patricia's voice came through clearly, sharp with anger and desperation. "You're being vindictive, Marcus. You're punishing us for trying to save your family relationships. The children are safe and happy. That should be enough until we can work out a reasonable solution. A reasonable solution that involves $50 million. A reasonable solution that involves you acknowledging that family matters more than money. That your children need their father present in their lives. That relationships require investment of time and attention, not just financial support." The conversation revealed how completely they'd convinced themselves that their actions were justified. Even facing financial ruin and criminal charges, they maintained that kidnapping my children was a legitimate intervention designed to improve our family dynamics. But Elena's surveillance team was reporting a different reality from the compound. The adults were arguing constantly. Their stress was affecting the children's mood and behavior, and preparations for relocating suggested they understood their position was untenable. "Emma asked to call you 17 times yesterday," Sarah admitted during a moment of honesty. "She doesn't understand why she can't talk to Daddy whenever she wants. Jake keeps asking when the camping trip will be over because he misses his soccer practice and his friends." The admission revealed the fundamental flaw in their psychological manipulation. Children, Emma and Jake's age, couldn't be convinced that voluntary separation from their father was beneficial. Their natural attachment and desire for normalcy was undermining the adults' carefully constructed narrative. "They're starting to understand something is wrong," I said. "They're realizing this isn't a normal camping trip, that the adults are lying to them about when they can go home." Robert's voice boomed across the connection. "What's wrong is that their father cares more about business meetings than bedtime stories, more about profit margins than soccer games, more about quarterly reports than quality time with his children. What's wrong is that their grandparents have kidnapped them to extort money from their father. What's wrong is that their family has traumatized them to cover up their financial crimes." The accusations flew back and forth, but underneath the anger and justifications, I could hear the sound of their resolve cracking. The financial pressure was working, the legal threats were real, and the family dynamics were imploding under stress. Elena's team intercepted additional communications that revealed the full scope of their desperation. Patricia had attempted to contact 3 different lawyers, all of whom refused representation once they understood the federal charges involved. Robert had called his doctor about chest pains and irregular heartbeat brought on by stress. David had tried to access emergency funds from accounts that were now frozen, leaving him unable to purchase basic supplies. "They're going to run," Elena predicted. "The compound is compromised, the financial pressure is unsustainable, and family unity is breaking down. They'll attempt to relocate with the children to buy time for negotiations." "Where would they go?" "David has relatives in Oregon, Patricia has friends in Arizona, Robert owns property in Nevada that we haven't frozen yet. Or they might try something more desperate, a motel, a rental property. Even camping in public areas where surveillance is difficult." The prospect of my children being dragged from location to location by increasingly desperate people made my chest tight with fear and rage. Emma and Jake were already confused and stressed. Being moved again would escalate their trauma significantly. "We end this today," I decided. "Before they can relocate, before they can disappear with my children into some extended chase across multiple states." Elena nodded grimly. "The longer this continues, the more desperate they become. Desperate people make dangerous decisions, especially when children are involved." The final phone call came at 11:47 a.m., with all 4 family members on the line and Elena's team recording every word for the criminal case that would follow. Patricia's voice was barely controlled. "Marcus, we're giving you one last chance to choose family over money, love over pride, relationships over revenge. Transfer the $50 million, commit to reasonable work-life balance, and your children come home today." "My children come home today regardless," I replied. "The only question is whether you face kidnapping charges, or kidnapping plus fleeing across state lines, which carries additional federal penalties." Sarah's voice broke completely. "You're destroying our family over money. You're choosing to punish us instead of working together to solve our problems. You destroyed our family when you decided my children were acceptable casualties in your financial schemes. You chose to weaponize Emma and Jake instead of asking for help with your gambling addiction and your debts." David's voice was bitter. "So that's it. You'd rather see us all go to prison than admit you've neglected your family responsibilities. I'd rather see my children safe at home than continue enabling people who think kidnapping is an appropriate intervention technique." The call ended with threats, pleas, and promises that meant nothing because trust had been destroyed completely. My family had revealed themselves to be people capable of using children as weapons, and no amount of justification could restore the relationships they'd shattered. Elena's team was already in position around the compound. Federal agents were coordinated, medical personnel was standing by, and child psychologists were prepared to help Emma and Jake process whatever trauma they'd experienced. "Final authorization?" Elena asked. I thought about my children, manipulated, held by people who'd convinced themselves that love justified any action, even kidnapping. I thought about the bedtime stories I'd missed and the soccer games I'd prioritized over conference calls. and how none of those failures justified what my family had done. Bring my children home, I said. That endgame was about to begin. The rescue operation began at 2:17 p.m. on Tuesday, with federal agents moving through the forests surrounding the compound like shadows. Elena's team had coordinated the assault with military precision FBI child recovery specialists, U.S. Marshals, local law enforcement, and emergency medical personnel, all positioned for simultaneous action. I watched from the mobile command center Elena had established 2 miles from the compound, banks of monitors showing real-time feeds from surveillance drones and agent body cameras. Emma and Jake were visible through thermal imaging, inside the main cabin with Patricia, while Robert and David argued in the secondary building. Primary team is in position, Elena reported through her headset. Medical team standing by. Child services personnel ready for immediate intervention. My hands were shaking as I watched the screens. After 7 days of psychological warfare, financial pressure, and strategic planning, my children were minutes away from freedom. But operations like this carried risks, confusion, panic, potential resistance from desperate people who might make dangerous decisions. Remember, Elena addressed her team through the radio. The adults may attempt to use the children as shields or leverage. Priority 1 is child safety. Everything else is secondary. The breach came from 3 directions simultaneously. FBI agents approached the main cabin where Emma and Jake were located, while U.S. Marshals surrounded the secondary building containing Robert and David. Local law enforcement blocked all vehicle access to prevent escape attempts. Patricia's scream was audible through the surveillance equipment as agents announced their presence. Federal agents, this is a lawful arrest warrant. Exit the building with your hands visible. Through the thermal imaging, I could see Emma and Jake moving quickly toward Patricia, their small forms clustering together in the confusion. Their body language showed fear and confusion, the exact trauma I'd been trying to prevent by negotiating instead of immediately involving law enforcement. Subjects in secondary building are not complying, came the radio report. Male voices arguing, movement suggesting they're destroying evidence or attempting communication with outside parties. Robert and David were apparently trying to coordinate some kind of resistance or escape, unaware that all their communication lines were compromised and their financial resources had been eliminated. The breakthrough came when Patricia, faced with the reality of federal agents surrounding her position, made the intelligent choice to prioritize the children's safety over her own criminal exposure. I'm coming out with the children, she called through the cabin door. Please don't hurt them. They're scared and confused. Elena's voice was calm and professional. Ma'am, exit slowly with your hands visible. The children will be immediately cared for by medical personnel and child specialists. No one will be harmed if you comply with instructions. The cabin door opened, and Patricia emerged with Emma and Jake clinging to her sides. Even through the grainy surveillance feed, I could see my children's terrified expressions, their confusion about why strange adults with guns were surrounding their grandmother. Emma was crying, her small face pressed against Patricia's leg. Jake stood protectively in front of his sister, his 8-year-old body tense with the instinct to defend her despite his own fear. They looked smaller than I remembered, vulnerable and lost in a situation that made no sense to their young minds. Daddy, Emma's voice carried across the tactical radio frequency as agents approached. Where's my daddy? I want my daddy. Her crying nearly broke my resolve to remain in the command center instead of rushing to the scene. Elena's hand on my shoulder was the only thing that kept me from abandoning protocol and potentially compromising the operation. Children are secure, came the radio report. Medical evaluation in progress. Both appear physically unharmed but emotionally distressed. Dr. Walsh, the child psychologist, was immediately on scene to assess Emma and Jake's condition and help them understand what was happening. Her voice was gentle and reassuring as she knelt to their eye level. Emma, Jake, my name is Dr. Walsh. Your daddy sent me to bring you home safely. You're not in trouble, and nobody is going to hurt you. We just need to make sure you're okay. Before you see Daddy, through the surveillance feed, I watched my children's faces transform from terror to cautious hope. Jake's protective stance relaxed slightly, though he maintained his position near Emma. She wiped her tears and looked directly at the camera she couldn't see. Is Daddy really coming? Emma asked Dr. Walsh. Grandma said he needed to learn about family time before we could go home. Daddy has been working very hard to bring you home. Dr. Walsh replied carefully. He missed you every single day you were gone. He's waiting for you right now. The secondary building proved more complicated. Robert and David barricaded themselves inside, apparently believing they could negotiate from a position of strength despite being completely surrounded by federal agents. This is Robert Chen, came the amplified voice through a bullhorn they'd apparently brought to the compound. We demand to speak with Marcus before surrendering. We have rights as American citizens. This is a family matter, not a federal crime. Elena. Response was swift and uncompromising. Mr. Chen, you are surrounded by federal agents executing valid arrest warrants for kidnapping, extortion, and conspiracy charges. Exit the building immediately with your hands visible, or we will use appropriate force to extract you. We want to negotiate. We want immunity in exchange for cooperation. We want our lawyer present before making any statements. The desperation in Robert's voice was obvious to everyone except himself. Men facing life sentences for kidnapping don't get to negotiate terms from inside buildings, surrounded by federal agents. David's voice joined the shouting. This is persecution. Marcus is using his wealth and connections to destroy his own family. We were trying to help him reconnect with his children. The irony was profound. They were claiming victimhood while being arrested for victimizing my children, even facing federal kidnapping charges. They maintained their delusion that extorting $50 million was actually family intervention. The standoff lasted 47 minutes before tactical teams deployed non-lethal methods to force compliance. Tear gas forced Robert and David from the building, both men coughing and stumbling into the custody of waiting agents. Robert's face was purple with rage and respiratory distress as he was handcuffed. This is police state tyranny. We're grandparents who love those children. Marcus has turned this into some kind of vindictive persecution. David was more pragmatic in his defeat. I want a lawyer immediately. I'm not saying anything without legal representation. This entire operation is going to be challenged in federal court. But their protests meant nothing compared to the sound of Emma's voice calling for me through the radio. Dr. Walsh, when can I see my daddy? I drew him a picture of the stars, and I want to show him the fish Jake caught. Very soon. Sweetheart, Dr. Walsh replied. Daddy is coming to get you right now. As federal agents loaded my family members into transport vehicles, as evidence teams began processing the compound, as medical personnel completed their evaluation of my children, I finally received the words I'd been waiting 7 days to hear. Mr. Chen, your children are safe, unharmed, and ready to go home. The rescue was complete, but the consequences were just beginning. The reunion with Emma and Jake happened in a sterile conference room at the FBI field office, surrounded by agents, psychologists, and social workers who needed to document everything for the criminal case. It wasn't the emotional homecoming I'd imagined during 7 days of planning their rescue. Emma ran to me the moment I entered the room, her small body colliding with mine like she was afraid I might disappear again. I knelt to catch her, breathing in her familiar strawberry shampoo scent and feeling her trembling against my chest. Daddy, she sobbed, I missed you so much. Grandma said you were learning about family time, but I just wanted to come home. Jake approached more cautiously, his 8-year-old mind trying to process why federal agents had arrested his grandparents, why his camping trip had ended with sirens and helicopters, why his father was crying while holding his sister. Dad, he said quietly, are we in trouble? Did we do something wrong? The question shattered something inside me. My children thought they might be responsible for the chaos surrounding them, that their desire to come home had somehow caused their family's arrest and destruction. No, buddy, I said, pulling him into our embrace. You didn't do anything wrong. Nothing that happened was your fault. Daddy just missed you and wanted you to come home safely. Dr. Walsh observed our reunion with clinical attention, taking notes that would become part of the psychological evaluation, documenting trauma too. My children, every tear, every question, every moment of confusion was evidence for the federal case against my family. Emma, Jake, Dr. Walsh interjected gently, can you tell your daddy about your camping trip? What activities did you enjoy? Emma's face brightened despite her tears. I caught a fish, Daddy. Grandpa Robert taught me how to hold the fishing pole, and I caught a really big fish. And Grandma Patricia showed me different birds through binoculars. Jake nodded enthusiastically. We built campfires every night and roasted marshmallows. And we hiked to a waterfall that was really tall. It was actually pretty fun. Except, he trailed off, his expression becoming uncertain. Except what, buddy? Except I kept asking when we could call you, and the grown-ups always said later, or tomorrow, or after dinner. And when I asked when we were going home, they said we had to wait for you to learn something important. Emma's voice became small. I drew you pictures every day, but Grandma said we couldn't send them until you were ready to see them. I didn't understand why you weren't ready. Each innocent revelation was another nail in my family's legal coffin. My children's own words documented how they'd been manipulated, lied to, and used as psychological weapons without understanding what was happening to them. Sarah arrived at the FBI office 3 hours later, escorted by federal marshals and accompanied by a public defender who looked overwhelmed by the complexity of the case. She was allowed a supervised visit with Emma and Jake, observed by Dr. Walsh, and recorded for evidence. The children's reaction to seeing their mother was complicated and heartbreaking. Emma ran to Sarah with the same enthusiasm she'd shown me, but Jake hung back, his face confused and hurt. Mommy, Emma cried. Why are there so many police people? Why did they take Grandma and Grandpa away? Are we going home now? Sarah's composure crumbled as she held Emma, her tears mixing with our daughter's hair. I'm so sorry, baby. Mommy made some very bad mistakes. Some grown-up problems got very complicated. Jake's voice was accusing, despite his young age. Mom, you said Daddy needed to learn about family time. You said that's why we couldn't call him. But Daddy says we didn't do anything wrong. The 8-year-old's logic was devastating in its clarity. He understood that the adults had lied to him, that the explanations for their separation from me hadn't been truthful, that something was fundamentally wrong with the situation. Sarah looked at me over our children's heads, her eyes pleading for some kind of forgiveness or understanding. But the woman who'd coordinated my children's kidnapping was a stranger wearing my wife's face. "Marcus," she whispered, "can we talk privately? Can we figure out how to fix this for the kids?" "There's nothing to fix, Sarah. You participated in kidnapping our children, you coached them to deliver ransom demands, you chose gambling over family, lies over trust, extortion over honesty. I chose trying to save our marriage over watching you disappear completely into your work. I chose intervention over divorce, family therapy over legal separation. You chose $50 million over your children's emotional well-being." The public defender interrupted our conversation. "Mr. Chen, my client is prepared to cooperate fully with federal investigators in exchange for consideration regarding sentencing. She's willing to provide testimony against the other defendants and accept responsibility for her role in planning this intervention." "Intervention," I laughed, the sound bitter and sharp. "Is that what we're still calling kidnapping?" Emma looked up at the angry adults surrounding her, her face scrunched with confusion. "Daddy, why is everyone so mad? Why can't we just go home and be a family?" The innocent question silenced the room. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that her family has been destroyed by people who claim to love her? How do you tell a child that her mother, grandmother, grandfather, and uncle had used her as a weapon against her father? Dr. Walsh answered with careful words designed to protect Emma's psychological development. "Sometimes grown-ups make very bad choices that hurt the people they love. Right now, the most important thing is making sure you and Jake are safe and happy." "Are Mommy and Grandma and Grandpa going to jail?" Jake asked with the directness that children use to cut through adult evasions. The question hung in the air, like smoke from a fire that had consumed everything we'd built together. Sarah's face crumpled completely, as she realized her son understood more about the consequences than she'd hoped. "Yes," I answered honestly. "They're going to face consequences for the choices they made. But you and Emma are going to be safe with Daddy, and we're going to make sure you're okay." Sarah's supervised visit lasted 30 minutes before she was taken back into federal custody. Emma cried when her mother left, not understanding why Mommy couldn't come home with us. Jake watched the proceedings with the serious expression of a child who's learning that adults aren't always trustworthy. As we finally prepared to leave the FBI office, Emma tugging on my hand and Jake carrying a small bag of possessions they'd accumulated during their week of captivity, Dr. Walsh pulled me aside for a private consultation. "They're going to need extensive therapy," she warned. "The psychological manipulation they experienced was sophisticated and damaging. Emma doesn't understand why her family lied to her. Jake is starting to question whether he can trust adult explanations about anything. How long will recovery take?" "Years, Mr. Chen. Children process trauma differently than adults, but they also carry it longer. This experience will affect their ability to trust family relationships, their understanding of love and loyalty, their sense of security in the world." As I walked my children to my car, Emma's hand in mine and Jake walking quietly beside us, I realized that rescuing them from kidnapping was just the beginning. The real challenge would be helping them heal from the betrayal of people they'd loved and trusted. The family that had raised me, supported me, and shared my success for 15 years was gone forever. But the family that mattered most, Jake and me, was finally safe. We were going home. **** 6 months later, I sat in a federal courthouse watching my family members receive their sentences. The legal proceedings had been thorough, devastating, and absolutely necessary for my children's future security. Patricia Chen, 68, was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for conspiracy to commit kidnapping, extortion, and child endangerment. The judge noted her role as the primary architect of the scheme, her manipulation of the children, and her complete lack of remorse during plea negotiations. "Mrs. Chen," Judge Morrison stated from the bench, "you exploited your position as a grandmother to traumatize children for financial gain. Your actions represent a profound betrayal of family trust and a callous disregard for child welfare." Patricia maintained her dignified composure throughout the sentencing, but her facade cracked when the judge denied her request for house arrest due to her cancer treatments. The woman who'd planned to teach me about family priorities would spend her remaining healthy years in federal prison. Robert Chen, 71, received 6 years for his role in the conspiracy, with the judge acknowledging his deteriorating health but emphasizing that illness doesn't excuse kidnapping. His restaurants had closed permanently after the scandal. His medical bills were being handled by state programs, and his retirement savings had been liquidated to pay legal fees. "Mr. Chen, you allowed your financial desperation to override your moral obligations to your grandchildren," Judge Morrison continued. "The court recognizes your health issues but cannot ignore the severity of using children as leverage in extortion schemes. David Chen, 33, was sentenced to 12 years as the most active participant in maintaining the kidnapping operation. His technical skills had been used to coordinate communications. His mobility had facilitated the children's transportation, and his resistance during the federal raid had demonstrated ongoing criminal intent. Mr. David Chen, the judge stated, "Your age and education make your participation particularly troubling. You understood the legal consequences of your actions, yet chose to endanger children for financial gain." David's wife Jennifer had filed for divorce during his pretrial detention. She'd moved with their 2 children to Oregon, changed their names, and secured a restraining order preventing any contact with her former husband. His children would grow up never knowing their father, a consequence that seemed to devastate him more than the prison sentence. Sarah's case was more complex due to her cooperation with federal investigators and her documented gambling addiction. She received 5 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation that would include mandatory addiction treatment and supervised visitation with Emma and Jake. Mrs. Chen, Judge Morrison addressed my wife. "Your gambling addiction explains, but does not excuse your decision to endanger your children. The court recognizes your cooperation with investigators and your expressed remorse. But kidnapping motivated by gambling debts represents a fundamental failure of parental responsibility." Sarah had testified against her family members in exchange for the reduced sentence, providing detailed information about the planning process, the financial motivations, and the psychological manipulation tactics they'd employed. Her testimony had been crucial for securing convictions, but had also revealed the depth of her deception over the years preceding the kidnapping. The civil lawsuit I'd filed, parallel to the criminal cases, resulted in complete financial recovery of all money they'd stolen or misappropriated, plus punitive damages that effectively bankrupted the remaining family members. Every asset they owned, houses, cars, business interests, retirement accounts, was liquidated to satisfy the judgment. Alina Rodriguez had continued investigating even after the criminal case concluded, uncovering additional financial crimes that extended back nearly 5 years. Sarah's gambling losses totaled over $1.2 million, funded through credit fraud, property theft, and systematic embezzlement from family accounts I'd provided for legitimate expenses. They weren't desperate because of sudden financial crisis, Alina explained during our final meeting. They were desperate because years of systematic theft and fraud had finally caught up with them. The kidnapping was their last attempt to avoid complete financial collapse. The psychological evaluation Dr. Walsh conducted on Emma and Jake provided crucial evidence for the custody case that followed. Sarah's parental rights were terminated for the duration of her incarceration, with supervised visitation rights contingent on successful completion of addiction treatment and psychological counseling. The children demonstrate significant trauma responses, consistent with psychological manipulation and betrayal by trusted adults. Dr. Walsh's report stated, "Recovery will require stability, consistency, and therapeutic intervention to address their damaged ability to trust family relationships." Emma, now 9, was making progress in therapy but still struggled with understanding why people who claimed to love her had used her to hurt her father. Her drawings had evolved from happy family scenes to complicated pictures that included police officers, judges, and empty spaces where family members used to be. "Why did Grandma lie to me about the camping trip?" she asked during one of our weekly therapy sessions with Dr. Walsh. "Why did she say you needed to learn about family time when she was really trying to steal money?" The questions were heartbreaking in their innocence and sophistication. Emma was learning lessons about human nature that no 9 need to understand. Jake, now 10, had developed a protective skepticism about adult explanations and promises. He questioned everything, demanded proof for claims that seemed too good to be true, and monitored my behavior for signs that I might disappoint or abandon him. "Dad," he said one evening while we worked on homework together, "how do I know you won't change your mind about loving me? How do I know you won't decide that work is more important than me?" The questions revealed the depth of psychological damage caused by adults who'd taught him that love was conditional, that family relationships involved manipulation and hidden agendas, that people who claimed to care about him could suddenly become enemies. But there were positive changes too. Emma's laughter had returned, brighter and more frequent as she realized that our new life was stable and safe. Jake had rejoined his soccer team and was excelling academically, channeling his analytical nature into productive activities. The 3 of us had developed new routines, new traditions, and new ways of being a family that didn't require the presence or approval of people who'd proven themselves untrustworthy. Family dinners happened every night at 6 o'clock. Bedtime stories were read in person, not through audio. Weekend activities prioritized Emma and Jake's interests over my business obligations. CloudSync Technologies continued thriving under the management structure I'd developed during the crisis. Delegating operational responsibility had actually improved the company's performance while allowing me to be more present for my children. As I watched my former family members being led away in shackles after their sentencing, I felt no satisfaction, no sense of victory or vindication. I felt only profound sadness for the relationships that had been destroyed by greed, addiction, and the terrible choices people make when they convince themselves that love justifies any action. Emma and HID would grow up without grandparents, without extended family support, without the network of relationships I'd hoped to provide them. But they would grow up safe, secure, and free from the psychological manipulation that had nearly destroyed their ability to trust the people who claimed to love them. The legal reckoning was complete, but the real work of rebuilding our family was just beginning. ***, 2 years after the rescue. Our house had been transformed from a showcase of success into a fortress of security and a sanctuary of healing. The open floor plan that once impressed business associates now featured strategic sightlines that allowed me to monitor all entrances. The pool area where we'd hosted family gatherings was now surrounded by discreet surveillance equipment and motion sensors. The security measures weren't paranoia, they were a necessity. Elena's firm had documented 3 attempts by unknown parties to access our property, 2 suspicious vehicles photographing our daily routines, and 1 incident where someone had attempted to contact Emma at her school claiming to be a family friend. Kidnapping cases generate copycats, Elena explained during our quarterly security review. People who believe wealthy families are vulnerable targets. Criminals who assume you've learned to pay ransoms. And unfortunately, sometimes family members who weren't directly involved in the original crime but harbor resentment about the consequences. Sarah's extended family cousins, aunts, uncles who'd enjoyed the peripheral benefits of my success had been largely excluded from our lives. Some understood the necessity and respected our boundaries. Others blamed me for destroying family relationships, as if I'd forced Patricia and Robert to kidnap my children. Emma, now 11, had grown into a thoughtful, cautious child who asked probing questions about people's motivations and watched adult behavior for signs of deception. She excelled academically but struggled socially, finding it difficult to trust other children's parents or accept invitations to activities where I couldn't personally verify her safety. Dr. Walsh says I have hypervigilance, Emma told me one evening as we worked on her science project together. That means I watch for danger even when there probably isn't any. How does that feel for you, sweetheart? Exhausting, she answered with startling honesty, but also safer. I know that people can pretend to love you while planning to hurt you. I know that adults lie to children when they want something, so I watch and listen and try to figure out what people really want. Her insights were sophisticated beyond her years, the product of therapy, observation, and hard-earned wisdom about human nature. She'd learned to read body language, to recognize manipulation tactics, to question explanations that seemed designed to make her compliant rather than informed. Jake, not 12, had channeled his protective instincts into martial arts training and academic excellence. He'd appointed himself Emma's guardian, walking her to and from school, monitoring her friendships, and intervening when other children teased her about her family's criminal history. Some kids at school found the news articles about mom and grandma going to prison, Jake told me during one of our weekly father-son lunches. They were saying Emma's family are criminals and asking if she's going to steal their lunch money. How did you handle that? I told them Emma's family are criminals, but she's not. I told them her dad built a billion-dollar company and catches bad guys who try to hurt kids. I told them if they mess with Emma, they mess with me. His loyalty was fierce and protective, but it also revealed the burden he carried as Emma's self-appointed defender. At 12, he was already developing the strategic thinking and situational awareness that would serve him well but also separate him from his peers. Dr. Walsh continued working with both children, helping them process their trauma while developing healthy coping mechanisms. The therapy sessions had evolved from crisis intervention to long-term psychological development, addressing not just the kidnapping but the broader implications of learning that family relationships could be weapons. They're remarkably resilient, Dr. Walsh assured me during our monthly consultation. The security you've provided, the consistency of your presence, and the honest communication about what happened has given them a foundation for healthy development. But they'll always carry some level of wariness about human relationships. Is it that necessarily bad? Not entirely. They're developing excellent judgment about people's character and motivations. They're learning to set boundaries, to question authority when it seems inappropriate, to protect themselves psychologically. These are valuable life skills, even if they were acquired through traumatic experiences. The changes in our family dynamics extended beyond security and psychology to fundamental shifts in how we related to each other and the world. Sunday dinners that once included extended family now feature just the 3 of us, plus occasionally Alina and Dr. Walsh, who'd become trusted friends rather than just professional consultants. CloudSync Technologies had become more than a business. It was a family legacy I was building for Emma and Jake. They visited the offices regularly, learned about technology and entrepreneurship, and understood that their father's work was meaningful rather than selfish. When I grow up, I want to build something that helps people, Emma announced during one office visit. Maybe not computers, but something important that makes life better for families. Jake's interests ran towards security and investigation. Influenced by his experiences with Elena's team and the federal agents who'd rescued them, "I want to help kids who get taken by bad people," he said. "I want to be like the agents who saved us." Their career aspirations reflected both their trauma and their resilience. Focused on building positive things for families, Jake concentrated on protecting people from predators. Both paths showed healthy processing of their experiences. Rather than being defined by victimhood, the financial aspects of rebuilding our lives had been complex but ultimately successful. The civil lawsuit recovery, combined with CloudSync's continued growth, had provided more than enough resources to fund security, therapy, education, and the lifestyle adjustments necessary for our new reality. I'd also established trusts for both children that would be controlled by independent trustees until they reached 35, ensuring that their inheritance couldn't be used as leverage against them by future manipulators. Elena's firm provided ongoing security consulting, while Dr. Walsh maintained therapeutic relationships that would continue through their teenage years and into adulthood. "You've created something remarkable," Dr. Walsh observed during our final formal session before transitioning to quarterly check-ins. "A family structure that prioritizes safety and healing while maintaining love and trust." Most kidnapping survivors struggle with family relationships for decades. Emma and Jake have actually developed stronger bonds with you because of how you handled the crisis and recovery, but the most meaningful progress was visible in small daily moments. Emma's spontaneous laughter during our movie nights. Jake's increasing willingness to invite friends over for dinner. Both children's growing confidence in expressing opinions, asking questions, and challenging my decisions when they disagreed. "Dad," Emma said one evening as we finished homework together, "I'm glad it's just us three now. I know that's probably mean to say about Mom and Grandma and Grandpa, but our family is better this way." "Why do you think that, sweetheart?" "Because nobody lies to us now. Nobody pretends to love us while planning to hurt us. Nobody uses us to get things they want. We just love each other because we want to, not because we have to or because we need something." Her wisdom was heartbreaking and profound. At 11 years old, she understood concepts about authentic relationships that many adults never grasp. The trauma that had nearly destroyed her ability to trust had ultimately taught her to recognize and value genuine love. That as I tucked Emma into bed that night and checked on Jake's reading progress, I realized that the family we'd rebuilt from the ashes of betrayal was stronger, healthier, and more honest than anything we'd lost. We were different people now, more cautious, more strategic, more protective of our emotional safety. But we were also more authentic, more connected, and more appreciative of the relationships that had survived the test of genuine crisis. The kidnapping had ended. The legal consequences had been imposed. The financial recovery was complete. But the real victory was in these quiet evening moments when my children felt safe enough to be vulnerable, honest enough to share their thoughts, and secure enough in my love to challenge my authority when they disagreed with my decisions. We'd survived the worst betrayal imaginable, and emerged as a family that couldn't be broken by anything less than death itself. Asterisk, asterisk, 5 years have passed since the kidnapping, and I'm writing this story in my home office while Emma, now 13, practices violin in the music room, and Jake, 15, works on robotics projects in the converted garage where CloudSync Technologies was born. The house still features security measures that would impress government facilities, but they've become invisible background elements rather than obvious fortress walls. Motion sensors disguised as landscape lighting, cameras integrated into architectural features, and communication systems that look like ordinary household technology. We live safely but not in fear. Sarah was released from federal prison 18 months ago and now lives in a supervised halfway house in Sacramento, 3 hours away from our Palo Alto home. Her supervised visitation rights allow monthly 4-hour meetings in a neutral location, monitored by court-appointed social workers, and contingent on her continued sobriety and psychological treatment. The visits are cordial but distant. Emma and Jake treat their mother like a friendly acquaintance rather than a parental figure, polite but emotionally detached. They ask about her health, share basic information about school and activities, but don't seek advice, comfort, or emotional connection. She feels like someone who used to be important, Emma explained after their most recent visit, like a teacher from elementary school that you remember but don't really miss. Jake's assessment was more analytical. She made choices that hurt us. She says she's sorry and she's getting better. But sorry doesn't undo trauma. Getting better doesn't restore trust. Their responses reflect years of therapy, emotional growth, and the hard-earned wisdom that comes from surviving betrayal by people who claim to love them. They're not bitter or angry. They've simply learned to distinguish between people who earn their trust and people who expect it based on biological relationships. Patricia died in federal prison 2 years ago. Her cancer treatment complicated by the stress of incarceration and the complete severing of family relationships. I didn't attend her funeral, but I allowed Emma and Jake to send flowers with a card that read, "We forgive you, but we couldn't forget. We hope you found peace." Robert was released early due to health complications and now lives in a state care facility in Nevada. His dementia has progressed to the point where he doesn't remember the kidnapping, the trial, or the consequences of his actions. In his confused mind, he's still a successful restaurant owner with grandchildren who visit regularly. David remains in federal prison, serving the remainder of his 12-year sentence. His ex-wife, Jennifer, remarried and moved to Canada with their children, who now carry their stepfather's surname and have no contact with their biological father. David writes letters to Emma and Jake occasionally, which I screen but don't share unless they specifically request to read them. Most of his correspondence consists of justifications for his actions, explanations of his financial pressures, and requests for forgiveness that demonstrate he still doesn't understand the fundamental violation of trust he participated in. The letters reveal a man who learned nothing from his consequences. CloudSync Technologies went public 3 years ago in an IPO that valued the company at $8.2 billion, making me one of the youngest tech billionaires in history. But the financial success feels different now. Less like validation and more like a tool for building security and opportunities for my children. Emma has developed into a remarkable young woman with her mother's intelligence and beauty but none of her tendencies. She excels academically, plays violin at near professional level, and has already begun developing business ideas that combine technology with social impact. I want to build systems that help families communicate honestly, she told me recently while outlining her ideas for a family therapy app. Technology that helps people recognize manipulation, set healthy boundaries, and build authentic relationships. Her entrepreneurial instincts are sophisticated, but her motivation is clearly rooted in our family's experiences. She wants to help other people avoid the betrayal and trauma we survived. Jake has grown into a young man with remarkable emotional intelligence and protective instincts. He's 6 feet tall now, practices mixed martial arts 4 days a week, and has been accepted into elite summer programs for cybersecurity and criminal justice. I want to specialize in financial crimes and family exploitation, he explained when discussing his college plans. People who use kids as weapons against their parents, who steal from family members, who abuse trust for money, want to catch them and put them in prison. His career goals are clearly influenced by our experiences, but he's channeled his anger into productive purposes rather than becoming consumed by revenge fantasies. Both children understand their inheritance will come with responsibilities as well as opportunities. The trusts I've established will fund their education, provide security for their families, and support philanthropic efforts focused on child protection and family crisis intervention. Money isn't evil, Emma observed during one of our weekly financial literacy discussions, but people can become evil when they love money more than they love people. We have to remember the difference. Jake's perspective is more pragmatic. Money is a tool. It can build good things or destroy good things, depending on who's using it and why. We have to be smarter than the people who tried to use us. Their insights reflect not just intelligence but emotional maturity forged through experiences that most adults never face. They understand power dynamics, recognize manipulation tactics, and value authentic relationships over convenient ones. Dr. Walsh transitioned from weekly therapy to quarterly consultations 2 years ago, declaring both children remarkably well-adjusted considering their traumatic experiences. She continues to marvel at their resilience and the strength of our family bonds. Most kidnapping survivors struggle with trust issues for decades, she explained during our final formal session. Emma and Jake have actually developed superior judgment about people's character and motivations. The trauma taught them to recognize authentic love and distinguish it from manipulation. Elena Rodriguez has become a family friend rather than just a security consultant, joining us for holidays and celebrations when we don't travel to more exotic locations. Her firm continues providing discreet protection services, but the threat level has decreased significantly as years have passed without incident. The best security is living well, Alina often says. Your children are confident, intelligent, and aware of potential dangers without being paralyzed by fear. That's the optimal outcome for a family that survived what you survived. The most profound change in our lives isn't what we've gained, but what we've learned to value. Sunday dinners happen without fail, regardless of business pressures or social obligations. Bedtime conversations take priority over conference calls. Emma's violin recitals and Jake's robotics competitions rank higher than quarterly board meetings. You know what I realized? Emma said recently while we walked through Golden Gate Park, a weekly tradition that started during her therapy but continued because we both enjoy it. The kidnapping didn't really change who we are, it just revealed who everyone else really was. Her observation was startling in its accuracy. The crisis hadn't transformed us, it had stripped away pretenses and revealed the authentic character of everyone involved. Sarah's gambling addiction, Patricia's manipulative nature, Robert's entitled desperation, David's willingness to exploit children. All of these traits had existed for years. Beneath surface relationships, the kidnapping had simply created circumstances where people revealed their true priorities. Money over children, manipulation over honesty, self-interest over family welfare. Do you think Mom and Grandma and Grandpa loved us? Jake asked during one of our father-son fishing trips, an activity that had become sacred time for processing difficult questions. I think they loved the idea of you, I answered carefully. They loved how loving you made them feel, how being your family reflected well on them. But real love protects people, even when it's difficult or expensive. Real love doesn't use children as weapons, though they loved themselves more than they loved us. I think they confused loving themselves with loving you. They convinced themselves that what they wanted was what you needed, that manipulating me was actually helping our family. These conversations happen regularly now. As Emma and Jake continue processing their experiences and developing their understanding of human relationships, they ask sophisticated questions about love, loyalty, trust, and the complex dynamics that exist within families. The answers I provide are honest but age-appropriate, designed to help them understand what happened without becoming cynical about human nature or family relationships in general. Last month, Emma asked if I ever regret how harshly I responded to the kidnapping, whether I feel guilty about the prison sentences and destroyed relationships. Do you regret calling the FBI instead of just paying the money? She asked. Never, I answered. Immediately, paying the ransom would have taught you that love is something you can buy and sell, that family relationships involve financial transactions, that adults can use children as leverage whenever they need money. It would have rewarded the people who hurt you and guaranteed they'd hurt you again, but they went to prison. Their lives were destroyed. They destroyed their own lives when they decided to kidnap you and Jake. I just documented their choices and ensured there were appropriate consequences. Jake nodded approvingly. If you'd paid them, other people might have tried to kidnap us too. Other families might have learned that rich people will pay ransoms for their kids. His strategic thinking impressed me, but it also reminded me that my 15-year-old son thinks about personal security and criminal threats more than most adults. The kidnapping had taught him valuable lessons about human nature, but it had also robbed him of the innocence that childhood should provide. As I finish writing this account, I can hear Emma practicing a Mozart concerto that she'll perform next month at a regional competition. Jake is in the garage, building a robot that can detect lies through micro-expression analysis, a project that clearly reflects his continued fascination with identifying deception and protecting vulnerable people. Our family is different than it was 5 years ago. We're more cautious, more strategic, more protective of our emotional safety. We trust slowly and verify constantly. We recognize manipulation tactics and refuse to accept them, even from people we love. But we're also stronger, more honest, and more connected than ever before. Emma and Jake know they can tell me anything without fear of judgment or manipulation. They know my love is unconditional and permanent. They know that no amount of money, success, or external pressure will ever make me choose anything over their well-being. The kidnapping taught us that family isn't about blood relationships, or shared history, or financial obligations. Family is about people who protect each other, who tell the truth even when it's difficult, who choose each other's welfare over their own convenience. Sarah, Patricia, Robert, and David were related to us, but they weren't our family. Emma, Jake, and we're family. We chose each other through the worst crisis imaginable, and will choose each other through whatever challenges the future brings. If you've ever trusted the wrong people, if you've ever had your love used as a weapon against you, if you've ever had to choose between mercy and justice for people who hurt your children, then you understand why I made the choices I made. Some betrayals are unforgivable. Some relationships can't be repaired. Some people forfeit their right to your love when they demonstrate they're willing to hurt the most precious things in your world. But some families, the ones built on authentic love rather than obligation or convenience, emerge from crisis stronger than they were before. Some children, properly protected and honestly informed, develop wisdom and resilience that will serve them throughout their lives. Emma and Jake are thriving, not despite what happened to them, but because of how we handled what happened to them. They learned that their Father will move heaven and earth to protect them, that love means action rather than words, that family means choosing each other's welfare over personal comfort. That's a lesson worth any price, including the complete destruction of relationships with people who proved they weren't worthy of our trust. We survived, we thrived, we became the family we were always meant to be. Once the people pretending to be family were finally removed from our lives, and that's a victory more valuable than any amount of money they could have stolen from us.